All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Victorious Ones podcast. Of course, I go by the name of King Von Jr. And of course, for those they're watching by way of YouTube, you go youtube.com/Von Resper Jr. And so, of course, for those that are watching on YouTube, you can follow. Like I say, you can follow the tags that are they're going at the bottom of the screen. So, but yeah, of course. Um, Today, of course, as of today, at least at least going to this weekend, um, first and foremost, I have a shirt that's representing the greatest of all time, Muhammad Ali. For his 81st birthday. Happy belated to him. Rest in peace. But also, also want to send my prayers and condolences to the family of Jay Briscoe. Such a tragic and devastating loss right now. What I mean? And of course, just hashtag the boys forever. Like I said, like my prayers and condolences go out to him, his family, his wife, his children, his fans. And so the wrestling community has felt a major devastating loss right now. That's like I said, I mean, it just goes to show that tomorrow is never guaranteed to anybody. So that's why wanted to share that as well. And of course, recently, this past Monday was MLK Day. You know what I mean? So of course, I celebrated that on Perfect Plex Talk Radio. So by the way, Victorious Ones podcast is presented by UPR Network, Unpopular Review Network. So affiliated with Perfect Plex Talk Radio, Unpopular Review. So for those that like to like to see other reviews as far as entertainment and everything like that, wrestling, what have you, Unpopular Review is right there for you as well. But but of course, without further ado, of course, I want to get, if anything, I will, excuse me, slow down. I want to get into the main topic of what I want to talk of what this episode is about. So this weekend is going to be a milestone birthday, if you will. So, so for those that have been watching, or or at least listen to my show, to my podcast for quite some time, you would see a certain pattern, a certain trend, is that I like to do spotlight episodes, whenever somebody has a birthday or any type of major career celebration, whatever. Like I said, like I said, pretty much that's been a trend from from day one, whether I was celebrating Romans, excuse me, celebrating Roman becoming the longest reigning Universal Champion. Like I said, whether I was celebrating Undertaker's birthday, Bret Hart's birthday, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, whatever, The Rock, what I mean, or even certain milestones for like John Cena's 20-year milestone, Randy Orton, whatever, that's been a trend, and that's something that I plan on continuing to do. So, like I said, this Saturday, January 21st, is going to be a milestone birthday for an NBA legend, someone who oftentimes gets sort of overlooked, like doesn't really get featured as much in my estimation, but his legacy is up there with the greatest to ever do it. And this guy was certainly a dream, if you will, to watch, pun intended. See what I did there. So, so of course you're gonna find out in a minute. Without further ado, this man has like I said, was absolute nightmare. Hence the title of the episode, Dreams and Nightmares. And I'm not talking about Meek Mill, but this guy was certainly a dream to watch, a nightmare for his opponents. Like I say, because of his incredible size, athleticism, the way that he was blessed with, with amazing footwork and coordination, because of because of the time that he spent playing soccer and handball, of course, before he ever picked up a basketball. And so even though he picked up the picked up the game of basketball a little bit later, but the way he adjusted was absolutely remarkable, and I firmly believe that um, if he were playing in today's time, he would dominate even more. You know, and this guy was very influential in so many different ways, and so like I said, people talk about 1 in a million. This guy's more like 1 in 100 million. So anyway, like I said, I've already gotten all the puns out the way. None other than the dream himself, Hakeem Olajuwon. So like I said, this guy is someone who for me is certainly worthy of of highlighting, of covering in honor of what I consider a milestone birthday. Anytime you turn 60, that's a huge blessing. So of course, without further ado, Hakeem Olajuwon, of course, was born on January 21st, 1963 in Lagos, Nigeria. So growing up, as I said before, Hakeem, his first sports were soccer and handball. And those came in handy because they helped with his footwork and and his hand-eye coordination when it was time to translate to basketball. And so I would say I think he picked up basketball by the time he was like 15, I want to say. And so by the time he turned 18, eventually it was time for him to to move to America. And say in fact, I think let me start. Sorry, let me slow down. At that time, as he transitioned, from soccer and everything to basketball, just because of the growth spurt that he had, and so the thing is, thing about that, like I said, so because of that growth spurt, eventually that caught the attention of Guy Lewis, who at the time was the coach for the University of Houston. And so so just like I said, it was just destiny for for Hakeem to like I said, let me start to eventually go to Houston. And so when Olajuwon went to Houston, that's where he played at the University of Houston, aka Phi Slamma Jamma. The reason why they were called that was because it was a team full of dunkers. So it was him, Clyde Drexler, and several others, and they were known for the high flying dunks and just intensity, like just very it's a very electrifying sort of team, if you will. And so of course, during his time in Houston, Hakeem led the Houston Cougars to the NCAA finals twice. In 1983, where they lost to North Carolina State, and then of course, right after that, Clyde Drexler went to the NBA, and in the 1983 draft, and then he led them back. Then of course Hakeem led them back to the finals. Led them back to the NCAA. Like I said, NCAA finals in 1984. This time they lost to the Georgetown Hoyas, coached by John Thompson and led by Patrick Ewing. So Hakeem and Patrick's rivalry started in college. So in college, Ewing got the W. But right after that, Olajuwon announced that he would turn pro and join the NBA. And so, and the thing about it was that I think there was a story where, where I guess where initially there was, there was the talks of him, I guess possibly, being drafted by the Knicks or something like that. But it was a funny story. Story was, it was, I guess was like one day, Hakeem went to New York. And he was like, this is too cold for me. And so, so whatever. I'm not saying that completely played into the decision, for him to go to the Rockets. But, I think it was like a tryout or something. And so, or I guess whatever the case was, or scouting or whatever. And so, so I guess he, like, the story was, it was like, he didn't show up to New York, just because of how cold it was or whatever. But long story short, it was meant for him to stay in Houston. So Olajuwon goes from playing his college basketball in Houston to be, to playing his pro basketball in Houston, most of his professional career in Houston, as he was drafted by the Rockets in the iconic, legendary 1984 NBA draft. So, so of course he was drafted. Of course, Hakeem was drafted first overall by his adopted hometown of Houston, the Houston Rockets. That is. So so like I said, you go from playing your college basketball in Houston after you first land in America, and now you're playing your professional career in Houston. And so, and the thing about it was also, let me backtrack a little bit. During his time in college, Olajuwon was actually trained by reigning back-to-back MVP at the time, Moses Malone. So Hakeem learned a lot of his physicality, and low post game. And at least just knowing how to be more effective and things like that, and just knowing how to take the pounding and the physicality of the professional game. He learned from one of the best to ever do it, and a guy who was a top tier superstar at that time. So who better to have as a mentor than somebody like Moses, and so and because of that, it helped Hakeem's game grow. It helped him grow up faster and like adjust even faster to the game of the NBA. And so, like I said, he was drafted first overall in 1984 in an absolutely stellar, stacked, transcendent draft that featured the likes of a certain young man, 6'6", out of North Carolina. You might have heard of him, named Michael Jeffrey Jordan. And of course, I look forward to doing an episode about him later down the line. Like I said, the draft featured Jordan, Charles Barkley, John Stockton, and many others. And so and of course, the punchline was that Sam Bowie, was drafted second overall between Hakeem and Michael. But now, okay, now obviously, in hindsight, the Sam Bowie thing was ridiculous. But as far as Olajuwon, there was no issue with the Rockets drafting him first overall, because at that time, with the way that the game was set up, in order for you to win a championship or to have the best chances of winning a championship, you need a center. You need a big man. Someone who was a low post presence, somebody who was who was a rim protector, effective scorer, all the things that you needed. Like I say, great interior defense. Someone who is pretty solid offensively, and things like that. All the things, all the things that you needed in an effective big man. And Olajuwon checked off all those boxes. So so of course, as a rookie, he makes his first out of 12 All-Star game appearances. So of course, he makes the so not only that, he makes the all rookie first team along with Jordan, who goes on to become the rookie of the year. So anyway, after that rookie season, Hakeem has his first taste of the NBA Finals in 1986 as the Houston Rockets, like I said, led by Hakeem Olajuwon at the time, Hakeem Olajuwon, before he put the H to his, before they add the H to his name, Hakeem Olajuwon, who was teamed up with Ralph Sampson, who was the first overall pick the year before in 1983. So together they formed the Twin Towers, and there was a lot of expectation, like I said, a lot of promise when it came to this team. And the reason why I say that is because in 1986 they pulled off one of the ultimate upsets in NBA history, as they bounced out the Showtime Lakers in the Western Conference Finals in like 5 games. Like I say, and like I say, and the thing is, these were the defending champion Lakers, who finally defeated the ball, like I said, he finally defeated Larry Bird and the Boston Celtics the year before in 1985. And so like I said, like I said, this same Lakers team led by Magic, Kareem, and Worthy, all stars and things, everything like that. Um, Powerhouse team, and this Rockets team found a way to beat them. Um, so I wouldn't say that Olajuwon was quite in his prime yet, or at least let me put it this way: at least he was close enough to it, and like I said, like I said, as far as that, let me slow down. Of course, in '85, he made, like I said, let me start. Like I said, '85, it makes the first All-Star game. In '86, makes, like I said, in 1986, he makes his first Finals appearance. And but the thing is, unfortunately for the Rockets, they were just way in over their head, way in over the head because they ran into the world beating 1986 Boston Celtics team, which you could argue as possibly Boston's greatest single season team of all time, and that says a lot considering the fact that they had Bill Russell, an 11-time NBA champion. But it's just something about the '86 Celtics team. They were a juggernaut. They were a powerhouse, and the Rockets were just way in over their head when it came to that. So of course, after that, that particular Rockets team hadn't fully recovered, and so because and the thing about it was that it's like it's like it's like certain teams have like this really bad sort of hangover, after losing after losing in a championship, and so the Houston Rockets went through a hangover, and what I mean by that was that they were plagued by like I said, what I mean by that was that they were plagued by injuries, first and foremost with Rob Sampson, who started to develop knee problems that would eventually cut his career short. And so during the during the 87-88 season, he was traded to the Golden State Warriors. And so so of course, fast forward, by the time we get to the 1988-89 season, Olajuwon is the undisputed leader for the very first time without having to share any other extra responsibilities with Sampson. But generally speaking, like I think a lot of people knew that Hakeem, like there was just something special about him, just a certain it factor that separated him even from Sampson himself. So there was no question at all. There was no denying that Olajuwon, was the undisputed, unquestioned leader, bona fide leader of that team. And it's just that there were, like I said, it felt like it was just like so much of a roller coaster ride going on with the Houston Rockets at the time. So they, so of course, eventually made a coaching transition as well. When they made excuse me, let me slow down. They also made a coaching transition when they hired Don Chaney. And so during this time, the Rockets were going through sort of like a roller coaster ride, if you will. Like they were just like pretty much like sort of like just in the middle, not really hitting that ceiling. And the reason why was just that Hakeem was just plagued with so much of a subpar supporting cast, and the thing is that this guy carried that city on his shoulders, on his back. It was just that it's tough when you have a supporting cast where was just like I don't want to sound demeaning, but what I mean. But it's just like carrying like really heavy luggage, that's pretty much what those Rockets teams were. And Hakeem did like I said, he did the very best he could with what he was given. And from that Rockets front office at the time, he really wasn't given much. Um, but he still made the most out of what he was given. Um, he still found ways to make lemonade out of lemons. And what I'm and the thing about it is, and of course, let me start. Um, what I mean by that is that you know, even and the thing about it, what I mean by that is that was that in the was that during the 88-89 season he finished as the league leader in rebounds with 13.5 rebounds per game, by a full rebound over 76er superstar, the round mound of rebound Charles Barkley. And he also, and the thing is, that season he also averaged 24.8 points per game. And during this time, he was even posting up great playoff numbers of like 37.5 points per game and 16.8 rebounds per game as well. But still, regardless, the Rockets were still eliminated by the Seattle Supersonics 3-1. And so there. And funny thing about Houston was that it felt like the Sonics were sort of like the kryptonite, consistently throughout this time, with the exception of the championship years. And so, and of course, like I said, of course, during that the 88-89 season, like I said, it was one of those seasons where Olajuwon did the best they could. But then by the time we get to the following season, the 89-90 season, was yet another disappointment by the Rockets, as they finished the season at 500. But the thing is, even in the midst of that disappointment, and and just in this era, this was an era of, like I said, of just regular playoff failures, early playoff exits and things like that. Hakeem still, once again, made lemonade out of lemons, as he led the league in rebounding with 14 rebounds per game, and led the league in blocks with 4.6 rebounds per game. I believe that was a career high as well. And of course, that was in fact that was a season where he actually averaged a quadruple double. So he became, at that time, the third of at that time he became the third player in NBA history to record a quadruple double. And so I think there's like 4 in NBA history. So David Robinson eventually became the 4th to do that 4 years later, in 1994. You know what I mean? So but like I said, but at the same time, even though he was putting up historical numbers, creating an all-time great case, resume, and things like that, he didn't have enough to show for it when it came to the team's standpoint. You know what I mean? So of course, in the 1990-91 season, the Rockets finished with the record of 52-30, with Don Chaney winning the Coach of the Year award. But that wasn't exactly one of Hakeem's more productive seasons, and this is during the prime of his career. So when you look at his prime numbers, you know what I mean? So like those those early heyday years, this was among one of his lowest production years, really, since his rookie season. And that season, he only averaged 21.8 points per game, but he suffered an eye injury. And of course, this injury was caused by an elbow to the eye socket from Chicago Bulls center Bill Cartwright. And so so as a result, Olajuwon that season only played like 56 games. But the thing about it is that because he missed so many games, he missed out on the chance of leading the league in rebounding for a third year in a row. I mean, I'm sorry. Um, and the thing about it is that he also averaged a league-leading 3.9 blocks per game, but that still wasn't enough because of the fact that the Rockets ended up getting swept by the Lakers in the playoffs. You know, um, now the 91-92 season really hit a low point for Olajuwon because of the fact that the Rockets only finished the season 42-40. But the big problem was the fact that they missed the playoffs for the very first time in his career. You know, um, and it's just like this season. The thing about it was that these back-to-back seasons from the 1990-91 to 91-92. It was just like this was a time where it's like when it rained, it poured. You know, um, and so what happened was what happened was during the season, Hakeem missed like just hold on. So what happened was during the season, Hakeem missed 2 weeks early in that season because he had an irregular heartbeat. As they call it, accelerated heartbeat, whatever. Like the thing is, his heart was beating at an irregular pace. So, despite his typical numbers, he still made the All-Star team that year. But it's just that he still couldn't pull his team out of he still couldn't pull his team out of that mediocrity level, if you will. And so not only that, like I said, it's just like I said, the thing is, not only did his team miss the playoffs, not only was he having health problems, but he also clashed with the front office to the point that after the season, he even requested a trade, in large part because of a bad contract. And the thing is, the reason why his contract was so bad was because his salary was actually, by league standards, was considerably low for someone who's a top center, for someone who's, a top tier player of his caliber, and so it's just like, and the thing about it was that this contract situation was atrocious, and so this, like I said, this was a time where Olajuwon and the Rockets front office came to blows, so what I mean, and so and the thing about it was that was not only was he angry and frustrated about his pay, but also because of the fact that the same front office, the same front office did not put in a great enough effort to surround him with the best quality talent. So and the thing about it was that the thing about it was that his concern was that he felt like the Rockets were more concerned with their business bottom line, whatever the case may be, rather than actually going out of their way to put them in the best position to possibly win. And so, and I'm going fast forward. I think that's the reason why those championships that he won carried so much weight because of what he had to go through previously. Because of the fact that he was given leftovers and things like that. And it's funny how we talk so much about LeBron's lack of help, lack of like I said, lack of a supporting cast. We talk about Dirk Nowitzki's lack of a supporting cast during that 2011 championship run. But Olajuwon was, I mean, you want to talk about somebody that was just dealt, I mean, a really bad hand, and the thing about it was so bad that it's like, that there was really, it's frustrating when you're in a situation that starts to like pull you out of character, if you will. Um, and I say like this. And the thing about it is that like overall, um, when and the thing is when we like when other players and and like writers and stuff like that talk about Olajuwon, they talk about they talk about him, like I say, being a model figure, I mean, having a like I say, having a great reputation, things like that. But there was a point in time where he did butt heads with management, and for good reason, because they were not giving him uh, the best pieces to put him in the best position to succeed. You know, and I know if I were in a situation like that, I'd feel the same way. You know, um, and all- and now and what made things even worse was that management even accused him of faking a hamstring injury. You know, because of how unhappy he was over his contract situation, and he's going on to obviously deny it. You know, and so it's just like, why would and the thing is, why would he fake an injury? If anything, he's one of the last players I would ever expect to fake anything. The bottom line was, um, he was frustrated, you know, and so and of course, um, there was a time where it seemed like the difference was seemed it seemed like the differences between him and the organization uh, would be looked at as irreconcilable, if you will. So the thing is, the war with him in the front office was nasty. It was brutal. So, um, but eventually, things changed. Hakeem made certain, sort of like life changes, if you will. What I mean? And eventually, um, recommitted himself to his faith. And so, so of course, afterwards, eventually, he made things up made things up with the Rockets front office. So of course, so of course, in spite of all that, eventually, he was not traded. You know, but instead, the Rockets, the Rockets got a new head coach, Rudy Tomjanovich. You know, and that was a major, like I said, if anything, that was a major blessing for Hakeem's career, because of the fact that, because of the fact that Rudy Tomjanovich, Rudy T, um, knew all about the Rockets front office. Or rather, I should say, he knew all about the Rockets franchise, because he started off as a player, and he was in other positions, like scout and stuff like that. So for the Rockets to make a coaching change, fire Don Chaney in place of Rudy Tomjanovich, that was something that excuse me, that the team absolutely needed. You know, and that is eventually what helped them, what helped take them and propel them to the next level. You know, and and the thing about it is, like I said, because of the fact that Rudy T knew that franchise like the front and back of his hand, that helped even more. And in the process, it also helped Hakeem's passing. You know, and so of course, Rudy T's first season with the Rockets was during the 1992-93 season. And of course, what I'm getting ready to get at is that Olajuwon's passing improved, because he averaged a career high 3.5 assists per game. So under Tomjanovich, there was a greater willingness to, like I said, there was a greater, like I said, there was a greater willingness for him to pass the ball instead of scoring. You know, and so Rudy T found a way to get Olajuwon to buy into his vision, and that's the mark of a great coach. When you're able to get your franchise player to buy into your vision to improve the team. Case in point, for example, Phil Jackson, the way that he was able to get Jordan to buy into the vision of the triangle offense, you know, and the thing about that was, I guess I'll say it like this, the most significant thing about that triangle offense was that it got the rest of the team involved. So everybody got the ball, but eventually, but eventually at the end of the day, Jordan was still going to be the deciding factor in the whole rotation. And I'll say there was something pretty similar when it came to the Houston Rockets. So Rudy T enforced more passing, you know. So and the thing about it was that because of that, it made it more difficult for, it made it more difficult for other teams to double and triple team. So eventually, so the thing is, in the end, it worked out both for him and for his teammates, because because of the fact that made it tougher, as I said before, for the opposing teams to double and triple team them the same way that the triangle offense made it difficult for defenses to double and triple team Jordan, because other players were getting involved. Same in Houston, So and of course, moving on. I'm not going to belabor this point any longer. So this new coaching change paid off in multiple ways. Not only did Hakeem's passing improve, but he also set a new career high at that time with 26.1 points per game. And the Rockets also set a new franchise record with 55 wins, advanced to the second round of the playoffs, and they pushed their playoff rival Seattle Supersonics to a 7th game before eventually losing overtime. But this was, I would say, Hakeem's first really sort of flagship season, because during this, because of the fact that during this 1992-93 season, his production was this: 26.1 points per game, 13 rebounds per game, 3.5 assists per game, 4.2 blocks per game, and he was, like I said, I'm sorry, like I said, 26.1 points per game, 13 rebounds per game, 3.5 assists per game, 4.2 blocks per game. He also finished second in the MVP race to Charles Barkley, with 22 votes to Barkley's 59. And Olajuwon was also rewarded with his first of back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year awards. And so, fast forward, by the time we get, fast forward, the Chicago Bulls have won their 3rd straight championship. Michael Jordan goes off to play baseball. So by this point, the floor is wide open. The door is wide open for any and everybody, to claim the throne that's been vacated. It's pretty much whosoever will. You know what I mean? So at this point, it was whosoever will step up to the plate and take their rightful place on the throne during Jordan's absence. So during this time, Olajuwon gained a great reputation as a clutch performer. It's also one of the top centers in the history of the NBA. And I'll say like this: during this 93, 90, like I said, during this phase, while Jordan was out, Olajuwon became more of a transcendent player and elevated his game and his legacy and his status as one of the top centers. Like I said, as one of the top centers in the history of the NBA. So with that, of course, with that being said, during that 93-94 season, Olajuwon had, like I said, his biggest flagship career-defining season. Because of the fact that he became the very first player in NBA history to win, to win a championship, Finals MVP, League MVP, and Defensive Player of the Year, all in the same season. So, so of course, for that season, he averaged 27.3 points per game, 11.9 rebounds per game, 3.6 assists per game, and 3.7 blocks per game. And and of course, all while at the same time, all while at the same time propelling the Houston Rockets to their greatest heights in franchise history. So his game, so his game excited so many fans. It influenced influenced future generations. It raised the morale of not only of the organization but the city of Houston itself. So and the thing is, he was turning their reputation around, because they had a nickname at the time called Choke City, because they were known for choking in the playoffs, in big games where it mattered. So he's turned the tide, changing the narrative of the like I said, changing the narrative of the franchise, of the city, from being Choke City to Clutch City. You know what I mean. And so I mean, his numbers were just absolutely transcended. And it's just like the run that he was on during this time was unlike any other outside of the likes of Jordan, Shaq, LeBron, Magic, whoever else you want to name. Olajuwon's pinnacle, so like during these championship years, like it was absolutely incredible. So, and the thing is, he went through the best of the best that the league had to offer. He, like I said, the fact that he outplayed the likes of Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, Patrick Ewing, David Robinson, Shaq, Mutombo, you name it. I mean, he was stacking up wins after wins after wins, W's after W's after W's. And of course, during that 93-94 season, he officially reached the mountaintop as the Houston Rockets defeated the New York Knicks in a grueling 7-game series in the NBA Finals. And so, let me start over. So I would say that this was his revenge season. And what I mean by that this was his, what I mean by that was the fact that he was getting his revenge on Patrick Ewing because of what happened 10 years earlier in the NCAA championship. So, this was his clapback against Ewing. And so, so of course, in the finals, in the finals in their head-to-head matchups, he absolutely dominated Ewing, outscoring him in every game of the series from game 1 to game 7. As Olajuwon averaged 26.9 points per game on 50% shooting, compared to Ewing's 18.9 points per game on 36.3% shooting. So the gap just widened. It was just absolutely unbelievable. And so the thing is, let me start over. Olajuwon was just, just completely just otherworldly. You know what I mean? And so of course, as a result, as a result of his amazing offense and defense, and just him being a terrorizer, if you will, he was named Finals MVP for his performance. And so, sorry, let me see if I got something else. Like I said, so as far as that, like I said, Olajuwon was absolutely incredible. I mean, he could not be denied. There was no denying how unstoppable he was during this run. I'll put this run up against really anybody. And this was him at his peak. This was him at the top of his game. And like I say, in the Rockets, changed their reputation from being Choke City to Clutch City, because he delivered in the clutch where it mattered the most. And the fact that the fact that he was able to do this without any all-stars on that team. Nobody except for him made the all-star team that season during that time. You know, uh, at that point there were no top 50, top 75 players. What I mean, and so that's why um, this uh, playoff run, you can make a case is probably being like is arguably being the toughest playoff run of all time, other than Dirk Nowitzki's 2011 run with the Mavericks. So following season, the Rockets get off to a rocky start. To the point where they finished the season, I want to say 47-35, but at least by the midway point of the season, they pull the trigger and execute, execute a rather surprise trade, where they trade Otis Thorpe to the Portland Trailblazers for Clyde Drexler. So Clyde reunites with his former University of Houston, he reunites with his former Houston Cougars teammate Olajuwon. Because of the fact that because Clyde knows that his window is closing fast. And things aren't getting any better in Portland. So Drexler, in a sense, goes back home and is a very effective number two guy to Hakeem. Drexler plays his role very, very well. And like I say, he was a vital, essential piece for that second Rockets championship team. And so of course, Houston, doing what they do best, beat Stockton Malone with in Utah, Barkley in Phoenix again. What I mean. So of course, I think that was one. I think it was the series where they went, where they came back from like being down like 3-1 or something, and eventually beat the Suns in 7 games. So they go, so of course, they go through Utah, they go through Phoenix, and so this is where, I mean, stuff really hits the fan, if you will. So during the 1995, like I said, during the 1994-95 season, because of the fact that the Rockets have struggled, Olajuwon goes from making the All-NBA first team, being the MVP the season before, to this season making the All-NBA third team, because David Robinson was the league MVP. Automatically, he was on the first team. Shaquille O'Neal of Orlando at the time made the All-NBA second team. Because that season he was a scoring champion. And so I'm sorry. So of course, fast forward, by the time we get to the Western Conference Finals, David Stern presents David Robinson with the league MVP award right at the beginning of that series with the Rockets. At the very beginning of that series with Houston, David Stern presents the Admiral with the MVP in front of Olajuwon. And I guess you could say further insult to injury, if you will. I'm pretty sure that he probably wasn't thinking about it at the time. Robinson was thanking and acknowledging all the other players that he played against, except for Hakeem. He did not acknowledge Olajuwon during his acceptance speech. He acknowledged all his other competitors except for Hakeem. And so it was already bad enough. It was already bad enough that Dream had to witness Robinson be awarded the MVP in front of him, when he knew, as the whole world knew, that Hakeem was the absolute best player during that time period. So to see somebody else get the MVP in front of you, and also for your name not to be mentioned, I mean, you want to talk about waking up a sleeping giant. That was enough to just ignite not only a flame but a complete inferno in Olajuwon, and he burnt Robinson, he burnt David Robinson, in just like in an unbelievable way. He just absolutely outplayed him, humiliated him, embarrassed him. You want to talk about getting packed up? Yeah. Hakeem packed him up, from game 1 through 6, completely outplayed him, outscored him. On the defensive end as well. I'll say it like this. It was it was almost like, I know I use this example a lot. With the way that Hakeem schooled guys like Robinson and Ewing, it was almost reminiscent of the way that Brock Lesnar packed up John Cena at SummerSlam, and the way that he packed up, at SummerSlam in 2014, with the way that Lesnar packed up Cena at SummerSlam 2014 with what was, I think it was like 16 German suplexes and 2 F5s to win the championship, and then also at SummerSlam 2016 with the way that he packed up Randy Orton, so with the way that Olajuwon schooled Young and Robinson was reminiscent of those performances by Lesnar. It was hard for me to think of it, of any other like truly like dominant performances, if you will, outside of maybe like Roman or something that that could come to mind. But I was just using an example of just the way that with the way that Hakeem just systematically picked apart his opponent, or rather, let's just say Hakeem excellently executed, his opponents the same way that Bret Hart used to excellently execute his opponents, pick them apart, and then when the time was right, hit him with a sharpshooter, and so I guess Hakeem's sharpshooter's go-to move was a dream shake, with the way that he was just shaking Dave Robinson, just out of his sneakers, pump fakes, spin moves, head fakes, all these different things, like type of stuff like that. It was night and day. And then the thing about it was that the MVP award was probably the best and worst thing to happen to the Admiral, because the fact that the thing is, other than the championship, that MVP was is certainly like the biggest, most important achievement on his resume. But at the same time, one of the biggest things that a lot of people remember him for was the way that he got schooled, So thing about it was that MVP award provoked Olajuwon, much like how Charles Barkley and Karl Malone's MVP awards provoked Jordan. So so if anything, if anything, if I say it like this, if anything, one of the things that I don't really hear people mention like that, I guess one of the things that's sort of overlooked that people don't probably don't even really recognize or or really talk about, is that Jordan and Olajuwon have more in common than a lot of people. They probably have more in common than a lot of people give them credit for. Obviously, other than the fact that they both came out of the 1984 draft. And of course, by far that they were the top two players to come out of that draft. They were the most dominant figures of the 90s. And as far as that, but not only that, but also they had incredible killer instinct. Olajuwon had incredible killer instinct. That's what separated him from a guy like David Robinson, from a guy like Patrick Ewing. Was that it's just like there was something in him that that it's just like there was a certain switch that went off in him when he felt he was robbed of that MVP. There's a certain switch that went off in him when his team's back was against the wall, and they had a lower seed, and it's just the way that he willed that Rockets team to win, the way that he willed them to their greatest success, and so of course, after dispatching Robinson, uh, Olajuwon carries the Rockets to the finals, where they go up against a rising star, a juggernaut in and of himself. If anything, Hakeem's successor, Shaquille O'Neal, in the Orlando Magic. So of course at that time Orlando was so of course at that time Orlando was a top team in the Eastern Conference, you know, and so Houston was a 6th seed, you know, and so I'm pretty sure that a lot of people expected Orlando to make short work of Houston. But the thing about it was that the Rockets had experience. Orlando, even though they had youth, but they're very naive. They got very arrogant. They got full of themselves, party too hard. Shaq would even admit it today, that Orlando, like I said, their ego just got way too big. They got greedy. They party too hard, you know, um, and so because of how naive they were, how inexperienced they were, Houston took advantage of that. Olajuwon certainly took advantage of that. He took advantage of that, of that mismatch. So, in that series, he outplayed Shaq, and of course, I'm sorry. It's, like I said, the thing about it is that, so, in that, like I said, in that series, he outplayed Shaq. He humbled him. He gave him a very strong. He gave him a very strong lesson. You know what I mean? And so it's just that, it was that Shaq, really had to learn the hard way. And if anything, that was a wake up call for him. If anything, that pretty sure that drove him to become an even better player. And those lessons that he learned in that embarrassment in the finals, Shaq applied those principles, applied those lessons to become a much greater player with the Lakers. And of course that translated into what we saw later on. Like I say, that series right there, along with Orlando getting swept the next year by Chicago. It's like Shaq took those losses, and if anything, those fueled him and ignited a fire in him to become an even greater player, and to eventually become, the legend that he would later become with the Lakers, and the legend that we know him as today. But it all started with this experience right here, and so the fact that Hakeem won, I'm sorry, let me slow down. The fact, like, let me slow down. The fact that Olajuwon did what he did, and just, like I say, and just absolutely dominated his competition. In fact, what? I guess because I got so caught up in, in just that story about Hakeem and Robinson. And the thing about it is that, of course, one of the things about me is that I like to bring up stats. So let me go back without further ado. As far as the stats was that Olajuwon in that Western Conference Finals, he averaged 35.3 points per game on 56% shooting, and Dave Robinson averaged 23 points per game on 45% shooting. And the thing is, he outscored Robinson 81-41 in the final 2 games of that series. In the series clincher game, Olajuwon had 39 points, 17 rebounds, and 5 blocks. And when asked later, and of course, and the thing about it, later on, David Robinson was interviewed by Life magazine, and so of course, in the interview, they asked him what a team could do to solve Olajuwon, quote unquote. And so Robinson was like, Hakeem, you don't solve Hakeem. There's no way that you can solve them. There's no way that you could. That was his way of saying there's no way that you could truly figure him out. And David Robinson himself has even talked about guarding. He likes to talked about how he guarded Hakeem as best as he could, but it still wasn't enough. You know, so you're talking about a fellow Hall of Fame center, former Defensive Player of the Year himself, playing the best defense that he possibly could, and it still was not enough. That just goes to show you how brilliant Hakeem's skills were, you know, to the point where he just crumbled the MVP and reduced him to 23.8 points per game, roughly 24 points per game, and roughly 45% shooting. I mean, come on now. I mean, that just demoralized him. I don't think that David Robinson truly recovered individually after that. At least until Tim Duncan, at least until years later when Tim Duncan came and carried him and the Spurs. Of course, carry him and the Spurs to 2 championships. But in terms of individually, the thing is, Robinson hadn't fully recovered after, because of that, and so. So of course the backtrack to the final series against Shaq. In that series, Hakeem averaged 33 points per game on 53% shooting, 10.3 rebounds, and 2.8 blocks in the playoffs. And the thing is, of course, let me start over. Let me start over. Of course, those are his averages in the playoffs themselves. But when it came to his head-to-head series against Shaq, certainly when it came to his head-to-head series with Shaq, he definitely averaged more than 30 points per game in the finals, and so because of that, he was named the Finals MVP. So, with that being said, the fact that during this window when Jordan was out, when the league was wide open for anybody to take over, for anybody to become great, Hakeem saw that window and took advantage of it, and won not only one but 2 championships. And I know that there have been detractors saying that he only won because the thing is, he only won because Jordan was out. But I certainly believe that if anybody else won those championships, people would have the same criticism of them as well. If Patrick Ewing did what he was supposed to do, and win those championships without Jordan being there, people would have the same criticisms of him. If David Robinson, won back-to-back championships, people had those same criticisms of him as well. Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, you name it. If any of those guys did what Olajuwon did, I'm pretty sure that they'll be hit with some of those same criticisms. But the fact is, they didn't do it. Hakeem did it. Hakeem was the one that maximized that window, maximized those opportunities, and made the most out of them. And because of that, his legacy was elevated because of that. Like I said, because of what he did during this time, it elevated his legacy and made him even more transcendent than ever before. If anything, it added to his legacy, it added to his legend, made his legend grow even more. And like I said, and for him to, and for him to outplay 3 of the greatest centers, not only of his time, but of all time, is absolutely remarkable. The fact that he outplayed 3 other top 75 players. The fact that he outplayed 3 other top 75 centers. I mean, that's the stuff of legend. And this might come off as a hot take, right? But there's a part of me that believes that if if the Rockets played against the Bulls in the finals, um, I think Olajuwon would find a way to walk out with at least one ring. Even if he did get, if even if he doesn't get two, the fact that I could see him getting away with one because of the fact that because of how Houston had Chicago's number in the regular season all the time, because of the mismatch at center, and so I would say Jordan would at least still get at least 7 if he didn't play baseball, so I would say about 7-1. That's not bad. So what I mean. So of course, later on he would still make All-Star appearances, but injuries. Let's start over. So later on, Hakeem would still make All-Star appearances, but injuries started to slow him down. You know what I mean? And and of course he became more of the elder statesman and things like that. So of course, he was still putting up pretty solid numbers, but he was no longer the force. Like I say, the force that he had been during his heyday. So I would say that Olajuwon's heyday, his best years, were between like 1987 to I would say 95 when he won his last championship. So he would go on to 1996. He will win an Olympic gold medal. He'll also be named one of the 50 greatest players. He'll, of course, eventually, he'll end up retiring as the Houston Rockets all-time leader all-time leader in most of their major categories, including points, rebounds, blocks, I think steals as well. I know he finished in the top 10 in those categories. Like I said, points, rebounds, blocks, and steals. For a guy his size to retire in the top 10 in steals, that speaks volumes of of his greatness. That speaks volumes of his defensive versatility. As great as Kevin Garnett was as a defender when it came to versatility, Olajuwon was a grade above that, like at least a step above that. So in 2008, he eventually go into the Hall of Fame, inducted with Patrick Ewing, by the way, which is funny. And of course, during the 2021-22 season, he was also named one of the top 75 players, rightfully so. So his numbers read as this: 2-time NBA champion, two-time Finals MVP, 1994 NBA MVP, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, 93 and 94, 12-time NBA All-Star, 6-time All-NBA First Team, 3-time All-NBA Second Team, 3-time All-NBA Third Team, 5-time All-Defensive First Team, 4-time All-Defensive Second Team, Olympic gold medalist in 1996. He finished with 26,946 points, 13,748 rebounds, 3,830 blocks, and 2,162 steals. And so I would say my top 5 Olajuwon seasons. Number 5 is his 1986 season. The reason why I say that was because that was his first finals appearance. Averaged 23.5, 23.5 points per game, 11.5 rebounds, 3.4 blocks. And of course, that's number 5. And number 4 is the 1989-90 season, as I mentioned before, 24.3 points per game, 14 rebounds per game, 2.1 steals, 4.6 blocks. And of course, at number 3, I'll say the 1992-93 season, 26.1 points per game, 13 rebounds per game, 26.1 points per game, 13 rebounds per game, 3.5 assists per game, 4.2 blocks per game. And that was his first Defensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year award. And number 2, I'll say the 1994-95 season, back-to-back season, 27.8 points per game, 10.8 rebounds per game, 3.5 assists, 3.5 blocks. Like I said, back-to-back finals. And of course, number 1, the 1993-94 season, flagship year, 27.3 points per game, 11.9 rebounds per game, 3.6 assists per game, 3.7 blocks per game, NBA champion, league MVP, finals MVP, you have it. So those are my top 5 Olajuwon seasons, and that was my recap of an extraordinary, remarkable career as he goes on to celebrate his 60th birthday this weekend. So it's certainly all a dream, as Biggie would say, and it was nothing but dreams and nightmares for his opponents.